Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production, and the second hour is something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to be talking about photogrammetry with phones and mobile and so on and so forth. It's something that we think is going to become pretty important soon, and so we'll talk about how it works and look at a couple of the apps that do it and answer your questions. So stay tuned for that. Also at 9 o'clock, we're talking about website construction and management with Ken. Sorry, my brain just turned off. It's been a long day with Ken. So anyway, Ken Jordan, and so anyway, so that's coming up later today. If you want to find out more about what we do, go to officehours.global. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill?
Good morning, one and all. The seventh scroll starts us out from Brooklyn, New York. Morning, guys. We're looking at getting 2 audience mics for $500 and under. Initially wanted to go with the Sennheiser 416, but our budget won't allow it. Are there any second-tier options you all would recommend?
Go ahead, Bill.
So, yeah, in shotgun, technically hypercardioid, because shotgun is a terrible word with microphones. And let me just wax for just a second on that. You tend to think with a shotgun that it's projecting out and grabbing sound, but if you think about it, all mics work exactly the same way, which is sound is generated somewhere, and they have to travel a distance to get to the element of the mic. And it doesn't matter whether you're on a large diaphragm condenser or a hypercardioid or anything else, that still works, which means the inverse square principle always functions. The farther away a sound is from the microphone, the less microphone energy is going to reach that microphone's capsule. So it's always going to work no matter what kind of mic you use. And so it's really important that your mic technique comes before the type of microphone you use. Now, that said, there are less expensive alternatives to the Sennheiser, which is a fine microphone. I'm speaking into a 416 right now. The Rode NTG series, we've heard a lot of good things about. There's some numbers. The top number, I think, is the NTG 3 or 4, and it is almost as much as the Sennheiser 416. And it's a really good mic. Even their lesser priced ones still do good, and I see more of them than anything else in kind of the next tier. Audio Technica also makes some very fine line gradient type or shotgun microphones, but those are some things to think about.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and it really depends on if you're talking $500 each or $500 as a whole. You might need to go a little bit over for that, but the Rode NTG is a $500 microphone in itself. And of course, it can go up, as Bill said. You have the Sennheiser MKE 600, which is around $300. And then Audio Technica has the 8035, which is a great microphone for around $269. I'd also suggest maybe look into some XY microphones instead of shotgun microphones, because they'll do just the same type of job that you're looking for.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Jeffrey. I think that, an MKE Sennheiser would be a good alternative. The other thing, don't forget, if you find a mic that you really like, do yourself a favor and check on eBay or check with B&H, for example. I just bought a Sanken Lav, and they're expensive mics. But if you get an open box or one that was used for demo, you might get it like 20-30% off. So that might help your budget and give you exactly what you wanted in the first place.
I've owned a lot of NTG 2s, which are about $269. So those would be very close to your budget. And I think they would, for an audience mic, they'd be fine for what you're doing. No, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He said, what references, app or web-based, do you prefer for musical chords and scales?
I don't know if any of us have any references for that specifically. Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'm a drummer, so nah.
I'm trying to think of anything that will go chords and scales. If you use Ultimate Guitar, every sheet music that they come with has stuff like that. But YouTube, when you do the learn blues guitar type stuff, there are some videos that'll actually put the finger positions and the keys on there that you can use for that. Other than that, I'm trying to think of the one book that I used when I was in college, and still very useful. But I'm going to have to look down in the basement at my library to get that name. And I'll do that later and put it in Discord.
Next question.
Next one comes from Mitch Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. Apple just updated a number of Pro Video formats, including ProRes RAW and ProRes RAW HQ. Do you use these codecs?
Go ahead, Bill.
And yes, I do, but I'm an Apple guy. I use Final Cut Pro, and they come out pretty quickly for that platform. I will say that codecs in general are kind of a dark art because they're intellectual property, and they're often produced by the manufacturers of a particular camera. When you get into like some of the Canon cameras, they have particular RAW or extended codecs that they make. So, you say, well, why can't I get a codec to work with this new camera that will work with Final Cut? It's not always the two sides, or Premiere or Avid or whatever. And it's not always the company making the software that has control of the intellectual property of the codec. Sometimes they're in groups that license codecs. There are associations that make certain codecs. They buy them, bring them into the association so everybody can use them. But it's often you are able to get what you can get. In this specific case, Apple fully owns ProRes RAW and ProRes RAW HQ, so they can update them at will, and they usually are pretty quick about doing that.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Bill. I think that staying in the Apple playground of ProRes makes a lot of sense. And if you're going to shoot RAW, and you can shoot RAW through some device, because a lot of things don't do it natively. I don't think Sony natively does that with the RAW or Arri or any of the big boys. But if you're shooting through, say, a Atomos or something like that, a Ninja, it really makes a lot of sense to use the ProRes because, if you're using Apple, it's going to work. And that can be an issue. They didn't just upgrade the ProRes. They also upgrade a lot of other things, including DNX. So if you have an Avid editing system, now you've got another option instead of hoping, because Avid can be very finicky about accepting codecs from other companies.
Yeah, and it's the thing about RAW is it really is designed to work with the cameras. So you have a lot of other Apple ProRes formats, and the reality is that we mostly, when we're delivering stuff to most of our partners, no matter what they're using to edit, they generally are asking for Apple ProRes RAW. I'm sorry, Apple ProRes, and then RAW is something that is increasingly becoming something camera manufacturers are looking for, especially camera manufacturers that are not as competitive. And so they're trying to find a way to make it a little easier and make it more fluid to work inside of Final Cut. While we often think of, Premiere and Avid, of course still has a foothold in Hollywood. And Premiere has, done really well in corporate environments. The unspoken thing is there's a lot of people using Final Cut, because it's $300 and you never have to upgrade. There's never any subscription, and so there's a massive market for it, and so the pressure is just slowly building. Where we used to hear requests for DNX, and we used to hear requests for other things, and now mostly it's just Apple ProRes. So it is an important format, and as this format is really designed so that cameras can capture to it, as opposed to just having it be a mezzanine format. Next question.
Moving on, the next one comes from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, and he says, with two Stream Decks on the same computer, I can run companion software either directly or with the plugin for Stream Deck software. Can you do both at the same time, where one Stream Deck is direct and the other uses a plugin?
Go ahead, Jason.
The short answer is that the two are completely independent, but I found that if you install the Stream Deck app, things just kind of get weird. So yes and no.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Maybe I'm slightly missing this, but let me show you what I got here. So I've got my 32 button Stream Deck right here, which Companion only takes up the first 15 buttons, and the rest of these buttons are being controlled through Stream Deck. Of course, if I hit this button right there, it goes to a different folder. There's all my vMix positions. And then I can go back. But if I go over to my second Stream Deck, which is the 15 button, I can do all the companions. And once again, I can bring this up, and I have other things where I can open up programs and then go right back into there. The only thing that I can think of other than that is, excuse me, if you run Companion on the one computer, you cannot have one screen of Companion on one Stream Deck and another screen of Companion on another Stream Deck.
And are you? And then both of those Stream Decks are connected to the same computer.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Great answer. Next question.
Next one comes from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California. How would you do active speaker in the physical world, where when a person speaks, the switcher automatically takes the shot of the camera assigned to that person, and when multiple people speak, the wide shot is automatically taken?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I know there's software for radio stations that want to cover their morning show and they need to have somebody doing the punching to get the correct shot. So if they have it for radio, I'm sure they have it for other stuff too, applications. I just can't recommend one right now.
Go ahead, Taylor.
Wouldn't this be, I mean, if you're, depending on what you're using, but if you're using Zoom and doing stuff like office hours, wouldn't Zoom,
He's not doing it in Zoom, though. It's like they have real cameras with people sitting on stage and they're trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that I don't know of any hardware that does it. We've talked about this. We used to call it the video Dugan, like and we played with things like using an Arduino board to see stuff. I think that the way I would probably experiment with it, if you wanted to try to do it on your own, would be to take something like Isadora. This is probably a great question for Elle on a Thursday. But basically, what you would do is if you fed all the channels that are all the mic channels into Isadora, you could build a behavior that basically then talked to an ATEM switcher. So basically it would say, I see this one, so go to this, and I see this one and go to this, and I see this one and go to this. And Isadora can definitely measure the levels and make a decision of when to cut to something based on that. Now, I don't know any hardware that does it. A lot of us have talked about putting it into hardware, but it basically is. But you could build your own with Isadora and then have it. Right now, we have it kind of talking to Mixpre Pro. To talk to the ATEM switcher, and so the switcher, but you can figure out what you want to talk to or how you want to talk to it there. But I think that you could build it. And the advantage of building it on your own is that you have a lot of control. You can build your own interface to tweak it because you may want to have a slower or faster attack or delay, decay, and like how fast do I cut to that person? Do I let them talk for a second before I jump? Do I make a decision about I might set behaviors in there that say I want you to never cut faster than 1 second or never cut faster than 2 seconds to make sure it's not chaotic if a lot of people start talking. So there's a bunch of behaviors that you could build and design and customize for what you're doing based on it. And Isadora would probably be a great one to do that with. It would just take a little bit of Dante and a little bit of Mixpre Pro and a little bit of just interacting there with your switcher, assuming you're using something like an ATEM. And this is one of the reasons that we like open architectures because there's probably a way to do that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
One of the broadcast ones, I just looked it up, Switcher Studio, and I think they're switcherstudio.com. Mm-hmm. We'll do that, and it's made for broadcast shows, so it'll do exactly the same thing.
Is Switcher Studio a controller?
It is a controller, software controller. It controls which camera.
Oh, interesting. Very good. And for I know we're just starting this hour, but for we're cutting through these questions so quickly for our producers. If you have more questions, we'll probably get to them this hour. So go ahead and start thinking about that. And let's go to the next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. It's about music synthesizers. He says, I recently purchased a Roland FANTOM-06 synthesizer, and I'm thinking of the most versatile synth to complement it. Considering I only have one stereo input left, would a Novation Peak be the best choice?
I don't know. I think that this morning's crowd is not as much of a synth group. So I don't. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
It'll be fine. I'd also look at the Roland Boutique because that I think that comes with less options than the Novation. So that's my best suggestion.
Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany says, can you suggest some near-field active speaker boxes for my desk? The price range is US $200 or thereabouts. XLR and 3.5 millimeter connectors are required to be used with a Mixpre Flow 8 or directly with a PC or Mac Mini.
Go ahead, John.
You're really, really pushing it with that price range right there. Probably something on the used market, maybe. I have Event 2020s, which are great. They don't have 3.5 inch in though. They've got XLRs, but Event, the Genelac or JBLs is what I'd be looking at. But you're not going to get anything in that price range.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, ditto on the Genelac. You'd have to get them used to meet that price. But I have a pair that I've had sitting over here, and I talk about them ad nauseum. I've had them for 15 years and no problems until I just mentioned it. But in the lower price range, KRK. JBL, and I think Audio Engine might make one that you like too.
Yeah, and I have some JBL 305P MK2s, which are not very expensive. I had to buy a lot of them, so I bought a bunch of pairs of them, and I think they're about $150 each. So they weren't, and I think they sound pretty good, for the price. Obviously, JBL makes some higher end ones that we've used in the past, but I want to have something that represents it for a near field. So far, I found them to be pretty good. Next question.
Lois Richter's up next from Davis, California. What's the easiest way to do a copyright? Is there a good resource to help us understand it?
And Lois, what do you want to do as far as copyright goes?
So we had a really lovely discussion earlier when we were in the pre-show, and there was a resource about understanding copyright if you want to make a trademark or copyright or whatever. And so I was hoping we could get that on air so people could hear it.
Go ahead, Bill. Yeah.
So understand a few things. First of all, we're talking about U.S. copyright law, if I'm talking, because I don't understand it in any other country, and each country may have their own laws, so be aware of that. If you want to understand a certain number of things, Stanford University has a really good site about copyright, and particularly fair use, which is something that content creators get in trouble with a lot because they don't understand really what fair use means. It'll explain it to you. I will say that Lois made the point, and she's exactly right, that when you create a new work of art, particularly if you're clean and it's not a derivative work of art that, you took something else that some other creator owned and made a new thing out of it. But if you truly create something unique, you have copyright technically of that from the moment of creation under U.S. law. What you get in trouble with is when there's some sort of a dispute about copyright, making sure that you can prove that you were there first and had the copyright on it, and that somebody has infringed your copyright, not done something with it that the law allows that doesn't violate your copyright. And there you get into things like derivative works and things like that, and fair use, which is that murky area where people think, I heard it on the radio so I can use it and put it against my commercial. No, you can't. And it's something that requires some effort. I would say I'm barely conversant as a civilian non-lawyer in copyright things, and I've been looking at it and studying it professionally because it relates to my business for 25 years. Serious copyright understanding does require lawyers, case laws, and understanding whether or not you're a violation. So be careful about it. And I always start with the idea that I do not own something unless I know for absolute sure that I do, and I can't use it unless I own it.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
The USPTO is actually a pretty excellent resource. Believe it or not, it's one of these government websites that has very coherent and kind of non-jargony leadership and guidance on this stuff. I can say that in business school, essentially, it kind of boiled down to, or at least what I was taught was, if you don't register the copyright, yeah, you may own it, but good luck getting any money.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, what Jason just said, because you could own that copyright, and unless you're ready to engage your lawyer to protect it, it's kind of meaningless. So people will get away with using it as long as they want until you fight them.
Next question.
Next question comes from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. NAB is usually the time to buy video plugins at a discount. Which plugin is on your personal hit list and why?
Mitchell?
Boris Effects has great discounts right at NAB time. It's a good time to bulk up on everything that they have. I don't like subscription services, and Boris has allowed me to actually buy them outright and to get them outright, everything from Sapphire to Continuum Complete to Mocha Pro and all the various flavors. I've already done that, so now I'm moving on to other things. So I've picked and choose from Red Giant, which is now Maxon. I think there's a bunch of bulked products together there that I would like to go for next.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I always thought it was a coincidence, but then I realized it's not a coincidence at all that when a big video trade show is about to happen, all the manufacturers of plugins understands that there's going to be a lot of searching, and so they try to make their products as visible as possible when they have mind share from the general audience out there. So no matter what you use in computer, let's say you are an accountant and you want to look at accounting software, if there's a big trade show having to do with accounting, you may find accounting plugins at a discount. So whatever your area of interest is, look around during anything that spikes public interest in your field, and you often find the deals coming there because they know it's happening at that time.
Yeah, Jeffrey?
Usually, I don't get the plugins before NAB because usually they're, as Bill said, they're just hoping that they're going to get some extra sales in some cases. But of course, I go to NAB and I talk to some of these companies, and when I find out what's going to happen with the plugin, like if there's going to be a new version coming out within the next couple months, what that version's going to do, and if it's going to if I'm going to actually use it, because there's a lot of plugins that I've bought. I used once and never used it again. So I'll talk to them and see what it is. And then I'll look at the reviews after NAB. And if I have to pay a little bit more, I have to pay a little bit more. That's just the job.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
In a perfect world, and I was able to attend NAB, and there was a lot of people, especially those little small booths are out of the way that have a single plug-in they just came. Sometimes there's gold there, and I would buy those, but it's just not the same world anymore.
Yeah, I think that Boris and Red are the two big leaders for most of the plugins that a lot of us end up using. The other ones that I use because I use Motion a lot is Motion VFX for templates as well as FX Factory. Both of those have a lot of great plugins, and I usually keep my eye out for when things are a little less expensive. Next question.
Jeffrey Powers, Madison, Wisconsin, here on the panel. So thoughts on the new GoPro Hero10 that requires soldering skills to use?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's the Hero10 Bones. It's a first-person view camera. It's got no screens on it. It's meant for drones, of course. And but I'm also thinking with the ability to actually connect it up to different items, I could see being put into things like into pies and things like that to really get an up close and personal view with the GoPro 10. And it's about $400 for the camera.
What do you have to solder?
Basically, you're soldering it right onto the drone, so it can get the battery directly from the drone. So there's also no battery inside this version of Hero. So it's very lightweight. I've seen some of the YouTubes on it, and a lot of the drone operators are really enjoying the fact that it's like 54 grams of weight. Yeah. So they can put it wherever they need to, and it's not going to get in the way.
I would have bought so many back in the day. This would be the perfect kind of thing for like when we used to do these spherical rigs that we 3D printed for GoPros that we could put into, have 6 of them or other arrays. And the problem was there was all this heat, and there was like dealing with the batteries and dealing with all the other bits and pieces. And it would have been, as a hacking kind of like, I'm trying to hack together something interesting, we just wanted less space. Like it'd been a big difference. So this would have been much better for us to have something like this. So I think it's a killer idea. Next question.
Next question comes from Ronnie Hofside in Tromsø, Norway. Would like to control several LG 43 UN 700Bs using the RS-232 mini jack, just like controlling a Blackmagic Smart Video Hub using Companion from one iTach IP at 2SL, where the display has its own ID. Will the RS-232 bus need to be daisy-chained, starred, or point-to-point?
I do not know. I do not know the answer for that. So what, I think that you can daisy chain it. I am not certain. So yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm not sure you can do that with RS-232. You might do it with 422. So there might be a question issue here.
Hey, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, wasn't our 232 strikes me as being a serial protocol, and 422 expanded it out. So I'm wondering if Mitchell is exactly right about that. I don't know enough about the insides just from my reading back in the days, because RS-232 has been around since, the 1970s.
Right. Yeah. Next question.
Diego Nunez in Barcelona, Spain says, researching SDI to USB ingest solutions for Resolume. Signal is 4K. Does the Blackmagic Web Presenter 4K pass the original resolution to the USB port, or does it scale it down to 1080?
Go ahead, Jason.
Depends on the web presenter. So the 4K will pass the 4K straight through, and it will give you 4K if you have the 4K version. If you have the 1080, it'll scale it down.
And then I think that you can also do something like Elgato has a HDMI to it, but you're looking for SDI. So then you're probably looking at the web presenter. When you say Resolume, I assume you're really doing something on a screen. And I would be I would lean towards getting something like a Sonnet and a card to do that over using the web presenter. The web presenter is going to compress it a fair bit on the way in, and there's going to be you're going to lose a couple frames. So when you say, the reason I'm saying this is if you were streaming, it wouldn't matter. If you are taking that source and putting it on a screen in front of people where they're going to have audio, you may have delay issues with a web presenter. Whereas if you got a Sonnet box and put a card into it, your latency will be lower. And usually, if you're putting something on a screen in front of folks, latency becomes very important. So I would consider going a little heavier in that solution as opposed to using the web presenter. Next question.
Next one comes from Eric Antonio in Washington, D.C. Can the panel recommend an audio software package that'll generate a frequency scanning signal to send out through an audio loop and then receive and analyze that same signal to look for deficiencies in the hardware loop? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to give you a really simple, just conceptual one. Get a pink noise generator, create the pink noise, and then use your eyes. That's the simplest way, I think, to do this.
Well, I think that you can also scan. I think what he wants to do is do a frequency scan. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, he's talking about a spectrum analyzer, essentially, by being able to sweep the frequencies. Most audio editing programs are going to be able to let you do that, and I'm sure if you did a search for a plugin, you could find it. But pink noise is the ticket. Jason's correct in saying that, because that's going to have equal volume on everything in the area that you're interested in.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to Jeff Vreeland in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm new to office hours and I've loved learning from you all, but I have come to the realization if I want to continue to improve my office setup, I need a new desk. What desks are you all using to house all these monitors, computers, and gadgets?
Go ahead, Jason.
And there goes the next 2 hours. No, my last 3 desks, I've basically just bought adjustable legs from Monoprice and then built the top.
Go ahead, Jeffrey, I'm sorry.
For me, sorry, Jeremy, I love that. For me, I use Ergotron. I actually worked with Ergotron a few years ago. I got sit stand desk, and the best part about that is I can move things around very easily. Let me show you really quick. So I have the Ergotron sit stand desk. I've got the Ergotron over here. The monitor arms, the dual monitor arms for the monitor. And then this is actually on wheels, so I can push this whole desk out of the way if the band wants to come over to play, or if I need to do a stand-up type video or anything like that. But then I will also, I also have my computer sitting on the other side through a mounting system. Let me show you really quick. So the computer's right there. So like I said, this whole table can be moved right out of the way if I need to, and then I'll be able to do what I need to do. That might be a little bit overkill for you, but I highly recommend a sit-stand desk.
Go ahead, Lois.
So it really depends on what your situation is as far as the room that you're going to be working in, and use what you've got. And if you don't have something that is comfortable for you, well, just find any table that's going to be comfortable and make it work.
Go ahead, Bill.
So I, for years, have had the same desk. This thing probably goes back about 25 years with me now. And this one came from Middle Atlantic, and I don't think you can see it very well in the shot. I'm sorry about that. As I was running up, turn that camera on, I knocked it askew. But anyway, this Middle Atlantic desk is designed specifically for video. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed having, it's a 2-tiered desk. It has what's called a bridge, so that the main surface of the desk, which is down here, allows me to put all the things that I will have to deal with manually. There's another level, and in between that level, it has rack mounts, which enables me to put switches, and it used to have test signal generators and things like that. The top layer allows me to clamp on all sorts of holders, which is why I can put all these extra monitors and things like that to get much more useful things at a glance. And it also provides a place for me to mount my teleprompter rig, and then I have the big monitor hanging over top of that. So specific furniture designed for audio video does have advantages over just building a desk. It does cost more money, but if you buy carefully, like I said, I paid for this once 25 years ago, and it's still working today.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I didn't buy a desk, I bought furniture, and there's a difference. In this case, I have furniture that rings my room perfectly in an L shape, and I bought it so long ago. over 25 years ago. I can't remember the name of the company I got it from, but I will tell you what it has that makes it very unique is it has a very solid tubular metal structure underneath the wood to support it so that I can hit it real hard and it does very little to interfere with my boom mic or my camera.
I really did a lot of research here, and I built a very high-tech, I know you'd expect me to build a very high-tech desk. I got a wooden 6-foot folding table. That's what I have right now. I've had it, even before office hours, this was probably 2.5 years ago, I had to kind of get set up, and I was like, I'm just going to set this up right now, and I have some folding tables, these really nice, they're really nice wooden ones. And I have these folding tables that I use for parties and stuff that are in my garage. And I put it out there and I put some gear on it and just have never taken the gear off. so eventually, we've talked in the past, if you look in the past of design, I'm designing a new office and slowly cobbling together, but I'm a little behind. And so I'm still on I have two folding desks, and then I have kind of a work desk that has lots of, has places I can hang things. That's pretty much it. I'm just wrapped around. I don't have a good wide shot of this, but I'm just kind of wrapped around there. All right, next question.
Next one comes from Fleety in Bali, Indonesia. Does anyone know the name of the font used for the Office Hours 2.0 lower thirds? It's super legible. He loves it.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I've been told that it's called Barlow.
Barlow. Yep. Yeah, this is a Google font. And so it's something that's free and you can use it anywhere. And there it is, Barlow. And it's a great font. I think that Tuomo, picked it out, and I think he picked well. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion over that way back when, and you need to get a font family that comes in different weights and such, because in the case of Barlow, you might need to shrink it down and have it very condensed if you're using it for a lower third with a lot of names that are extended. So I think it was a good choice, and it's not a serif font, so it's a sans serif font. It works well. Congratulations.
Yeah, I think it also looks really nice and modern. And one thing, in the old days, we had to be very careful because fonts, they've been creating fonts since the days of Aldus Mandatus, the typesetting guy that stuff was named for. And the thing is, the old ones didn't translate always well to video, and video was low resolution in the old days. It's gotten much higher resolution, so the fonts have been able to do more interesting things visually now that we're in a higher resolution, more just clarity of display technology. So this font, I think, looks really great, particularly because of the non-bold versions are very thin, and yet they're still very distinct and very readable. And that's really good in this era where we have high resolution screens and you can get more information and it looks nice and compact, yet still reads clearly on all the iDevices and the big monitors and projected and whatever. I just think fonts have come a long way. So the modern ones tend to get better over time because they understand the environment they're working in.
Next question.
Next one comes from Guy Cochran in Seattle. Blackmagic has an event scheduled in 5 days titled DaVinci Resolve Cloud Update. What could we speculate that will be shown?
I'm going to guess, looking at the title, it's going to be DaVinci in the cloud. So it's going to be some kind of DaVinci in the cloud. I'm just saying, when it has cloud update, because what I think is funny is cloud update, like it was there already, and so I think that DaVinci, obviously during COVID, there's been a lot of pressure on getting things into the cloud. And so it seems like if you have software, it would make sense. I have to admit, what I'd really like to see is ATEM in the cloud. so the taking all the software and putting it in the cloud. That one I'd be more excited about than Resolve. But I think that it'll be interesting to see what they leverage here. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, obviously, I think the entire industry understands that more and more both processing, storage of assets and things like that are going to be migrating to the cloud because it's so incredibly usefulness enhancing to be able to go to one cloud source and download things, particularly as bandwidth gets bigger and better. These companies, and we were talking about places like LucidLink earlier, who do specialize in cloud hosting and your desktop and making that link as fast and as reliable as possible. They're kind of a wave of the future. We know that Adobe bought Frame.io, I think, with that play in mind, to be able to put workflows into the cloud, and if not entirely into the cloud, at least make that connection between the desktop and the cloud work faster and better continuously. So I think nothing but more of that's going to be happening, and this is DaVinci's play to start establishing their footprint in a cloud to desktop environment.
You go, John.
I think Bill's right. I think they're going to do exactly what Frame.io did, what Adobe did with Frame.io. They're just going to integrate it, make so you could do collaboration in the cloud using DaVinci on the desktop.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see color. Of course, color accuracy will be really interesting. I do think that potentially, if they get it right, it's one thing to just have Parsec or something controlling a cloud instance of the software, and it's another thing for the company to actually put the tools into it directly. And I think it's exciting to see where they're going with this. And I hope again that they look at some of their other software and even hardware solutions like the ATEM and put it in the cloud. All right, next question.
Chris Weidler in Lafayette, Indiana says, how far is too far with reinforcing color schemes for logoed events? Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, but if you're talking about taking a corporate logo and pushing it into some medium like video or HTML, obviously the colors used in the corporate logo need to fit in the color space of the projected usage area. Also, don't use other colors that clash with the logo, because the logo's got very specific guidelines, particularly if it's a corporate logo, about other colors, spacing. Sometimes black and white will work best, but one example would be I really hate it when I get a teal logo because they're very particular about that teal, and the problem is in video, teal wants to be green or wants to be blue, and sometimes somewhere in between.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have a story on this. I'll be very quick on it. I worked with a company and we did some videos. This was back about 10 years ago. And I had to put, of course, tips and tails onto the video with of course, their logo. One of their employees kept coming back and saying, no, this logo is not the right color blue. It's too yellow, and do it again. We went through 9 revisions of that, going back and forth, and it got to the point where it's like, now you're starting to waste my time in the rendering process. Turned out that he was looking at it through QuickTime, and at that point, QuickTime had a problem where it didn't read blues correctly. It actually it was a problem with the yellow that created the blue issue, and because of that little error, I lost the job. And B, basically I lost a job because of his error, and which was really sad. So it's important as you go to understand things like that. So if somebody does come back and say, no, that's not right, you can go back and say, well, are you looking through QuickTime? And I don't know how I could have done that back then.
Go ahead, Bill.
The bigger the brand, the more they're going to be persnickety about this, with good reason. This is part of their brand equity, and literally it makes a huge difference in terms of company success. I mean, I remember the first time I bought, even when we were struggling financially, a little trinket from Tiffany, and that blue box made a difference. When my wife opened it, she said, I've never gotten anything from Tiffany before. And she knew the moment she saw it that color was that brand. So in corporate work, that's very important. And that's one of the ways you're going to get your client to feel that you understand them, is to understand their brand book, read it through, use the fonts that they use the colors that they use, not just the primary colors, but the secondary and tertiary colors, so that when you're doing little highlights, it all feels like their brand, and then they will embrace you and say, this provider gets us. And it's a powerful thing.
I find that sub Fortune 500, they're just happy to have graphics. Like they just, like they're okay. Above above Fortune 100, they want it to be correct, but they understand the vagaries of process. But between 500 and 100, you have a whole bunch of agencies that will just look at every little pixel and tell you that this is wrong. There's some kind of growth process in the company. So when they get to the really big ones, they definitely want you to, they give you it and they expect you to hit it. But they know that, NTSC really stands for never the same color. and they understand that, you know, there's stuff on the web that isn't going to be perfect, and they understand that print is going to come out the way it is, and they don't lose as much sleep over it. But the ones that are between 500 and 100 are these agencies that will sit there. I swear they walk out with a colorimeter and just like put it on top of the thing and say, well, that isn't right. And I'm like, under which light? You know, like that you're going to be changing the light the whole time, and which light is that going to be wrong? And so it's there's kind of a maturity process, I think, in that area. We definitely take it seriously, and we put it into the render. So if they send us something with a hex code or with an RGB code, we will put that color into the rendering, and then or into our stuff. But we have to always make sure that we educate our clients that their screens are different, you know, and so that, you know, it's going to be very hard for us to be accurate. We do push people often towards an iPhone, I admit, because that's what we measure against, is because we look at it on the iPhone and make sure that it looks right, because an iPhone without any coloring turned on and off is the cheapest, most accurate monitor that you have as far as color goes. Apple spent a lot of money making sure it was just right. And so we find that if we look at the color there, we have a pretty good idea what's going on. When we don't have a color accurate monitor in front of a client in a meeting. Next question.
Next one comes from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. He says, if I use Filmic Pro on my iPhone 12 Pro, can I run Filmic Remote on either an Android S9 or S20, a Windows PC, or an Intel Mac Mini, or would Remote need to run on another iPhone?
I have to admit, I've never done it any other way other than another iPhone. So when you asked that use case, I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I can do with that. So we'll have to test it. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I would suspect you might have problems. The only reason I'm saying that is because Apple has what they call a managed color pipeline, and one of the great benefits of that is that on every iDevice and on every Mac screen, colors should function mostly the same way and be accurate. I'm not sure if a random Android, one of those operating systems, will process color exactly the same way. It may or may not. I agree with Alex. This is something that would be interesting to test to figure out whether there's compatibility in the color spaces of the various devices out there.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have an Android phone right over there. I'll do the test today, and I'll get back to you tomorrow on that, because it does have Filmic Pro on there, but I've never done the remote crossover.
Yeah, so definitely ask that question tomorrow, and we'll hold Jeffrey to his word that he will have it tested and figured out by tomorrow morning. All right, next question.
Josh Kaufman in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania says Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I moved him. For NAB floor coverage, what methods have been used to get reliable internet connections to cover this event? What is the cost and limitation of past connection methods?
Go ahead, John.
Alex can add more, but I tell you, Ferguson has a meeting with Ross. He's upgrading his switcher to a Ross switcher. He's got a meeting with Ross. They're right next to Blackmagic. So Doug's going to go in there, and we're going to see if we can get a connection to Zoom as he walks around the show floor.
You go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I've done this before as press, and I've done this as having a booth at CES, not NAB. This is pretty much the same thing, and that is Cox will drop a dedicated line to you, and that's how you get the best reliable signal, and that's not as great as best itself. So
good, Bill.
Not a task to take on if you're an amateur in this. I've never had more difficulties getting reliable service out of anywhere in my life than the floor of NAB. There is so many users hitting even though they have a lot of bandwidth and the rest of that, there's just tons of users all using devices out on that stage floor. It's also got a lot of concrete and blockers for RF and Wi-Fi and things like that. The only way I've ever seen it be reliable is to pay to pay the Las Vegas Convention Center or whomever is there to drop a line into a booth, which is crazy expensive.
Yeah. Jason.
Yeah, I've gone to NAB maybe 10, 11 years running, and I've never even tried. It's just,
For wireless, as far as coverage goes, we have been fairly successful with live views for the last probably 12 years or so that we've used them on and off inside of that convention center. The only place that they don't work is the central hall, right where there's restaurants right down the center of the central hall. That's where Panasonic used to have their booth. I think it's going to be different this year. But Panasonic used to have a booth there, and that is a dead end. Like, it just, for whatever reason, that was the only place in North, South, Central Hall that we couldn't get a live view to work was that area there. Single, like just using the internet there is it has been disastrous. Now, the topology, it's been years since we've done it because of COVID. There are going to be less people there. There's a lot of things that could be different this year than they have been in the past. But those are the things you have to look at. When we're actually doing it for a real job, we order the internet. Oftentimes we're working at a booth that has a lot of investment already. So they're already bringing in a gig, for just the booth. And then the other thing to know is that your wireless won't work very far. So if you have a wireless transmitter so what we ended up doing, we worked on a fairly large booth in the center of Central Hall. And what we did is we ran redundant fiber 2 different ways to every hit point that we were going to have. So we met with the client in November for CES, and then we dropped because in December we had to run the fiber for it because they start putting the flooring in. And the reason you run 2 separate ones is because the forklifts will invariably cut one of them while they're moving around. So you run 2 separate ones to each one of those. And then what we were able to do is put a receiver when we needed it. So we had like 3 receivers, and we'd have them in a couple different places, and we just kind of moved them around for each show so that we knew where we were going to throw it to. But then that fiber came back to our central location, and then we were able to stream from there. So it was a 2-month process or 2.5-month process to get those in to cover a whole large booth. But to roam around, we used the live views again very successfully, except for right in the middle of the central hall, which I think is less prominent in this year than others. Next question.
Next question comes from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Sony hybrid cameras don't have traditional shading functionality. Exposure, white balance are adjustable, as well as preset picture profiles, some of which can be customized. What would be the most effective settings to align such cams with scopes?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, if you're using a Sony camera and you're lucky enough to have an S-Cinetone setting preset, you're in luck. You've got a great starting point for this kind of use. I mean, there's all kinds of different uses, but you're looking at an FX3, which is a little high-end camera from Sony, higher-end camera. And this is S-Cinetone with a ProMist black filter on it. So if it make me look good, it can make anything look good.
The other way to do it is to get something so Blackmagic has a series of boxes. Sometimes they're HDMI to SDI converters. I haven't looked recently if they've made any that are just pure LUT boxes, but you can put LUTs into them. So then what you do is you take your camera, you run it through that and capture it on the other side. Then you take that into Resolve, you build a LUT, and then you load it into that box. So now you have very fine controls, much finer than Sony's going to give you to control that. You just need it needs to go through that box to have the LUT applied. Next question.
David Brady in New York City has this one. BroadcastTools.de, German company maybe, recently released NDI Scopes. Has anyone on the panel seen or used this? And he has a link there.
Yeah, it looks interesting. I'm not even familiar with the, I have to admit, I'm not familiar with the company. These look like solid scopes. It looks like if you're using, it says download from GitHub. So I'm not sure if it costs anything. We'll have to do some research on that. It looks like a pretty solid setup. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was going to say that it looks open source at this point in time. As long as you have a decent monitor to it, I'd love to see this on the iPad, because that's what I've been doing with a lot of NDI, is bringing it into my iPad too. And of course, that'll have the right screen for me to look at that at these colors for any camera.
My temptation would still be to get Omniscope, no Omniscope, and find a way to get the NDI into the, as opposed to using and it depends on what your use case is. If you're using it on your own, or you're responsible to yourself, then I think playing with that would make sense. If I have to explain it to a client, I'd probably want to have something that probably had more features and someone actually accountable for it. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, says, on the Rode Go 2, is there any way to turn off the LEDs, not dim but off?
Go ahead, Bill.
And I'm being silly, but gaffer's tape.
I was going to say the same thing.
Use a strip of gaffer's tape. I don't like that light. Done.
2 words, gaffer's tape. I don't know how to turn those things off. There might be a way to turn them off internally, but the gaffer's tape or Sharpie. You could do a Sharpie and turn those things right off. It'll stay off as long as you want. A little pro tip about Sharpies is they're not nearly as permanent as you think. So we use them a lot on little, if they're on some kind of acetate, you can put Sharpie on, You can come back and you take the Sharpie and you just rub on it again, and then quickly rub it off with a cloth, and it'll just take it off. The chemicals that have the Sharpie come out will take the Sharpie off of any surface. And so, like if someone, my kids, I had a whiteboard in one of my offices, and my kids came in and just drew all over the bottom of it, and then but it was in permanent pen, and so in Sharpie instead of they had picked it up from somewhere else in the office. And all we did is use we actually took you can do any of those Expo Market marks or the Sharpie, and you just scribble all over them and then wipe it all off, and it'll take it all with it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I just recently had cataract surgery, and they put a mark on my eye to indicate this eye, and it was done in a Sharpie, and it took a week to wear off.
You could have just done exactly what I said. You could have just scribbled on it and then wiped it off, and it would have come right off. I'm just saying, you didn't have to let it sit there for a week.
I'm going to have to talk to you in the future before I have that.
Yeah, exactly. It'll probably give you cancer, but you won't have a Sharpie mark anymore. All right, next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. What encoding codec has the lowest packet overhead? I'm looking for the most efficient use over a stealth VPN.
Yeah, so the main thing you have to figure out there is what, when you say the lowest packet overhead, which is where does it have to be lowest overhead? So in the encode and the decode and the transport. So I think that because those all make a difference as far as that goes. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I would think that H.265 with a variable bitrate codec would be the best. It's the best technology that's available right now.
I mean, H.265, VP9, AV1, those are all very. Now the thing is like AV1 is a good example. It takes a lot of overhead to encode it, but it is a lighter. It's a lighter codec to transport, so it's very efficient to get from one place to the other. But you need the horsepower to turn it into bits. So it just depends on where the efficiency needs to live. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington says, been asked to design or get a tablecloth for doing food education demos at events. Debating on a vinyl banner, easy cleaning but hard to attach, versus a cloth tablecloth, wrinkles and staining worries. Any other ideas of what may work or transportation tips for it?
Go, Jeffrey.
So I'm assuming you're doing it right on the table. So two things that I'm going to suggest. First of all, do what a lot of these restaurants do, and that's just take a big piece of paper and put it on the table. You can draw on that, and then you can move it off to the side, put another piece of paper on. The other thing is you can create a lightboard table or a whiteboard table. I'd like the lightboard idea because then you can use the neon markers instead of the other ones. So basically, you make it nice and black. You can put a piece of glass on top of it, take some LED strips around it, so it lights up the table perfectly. And then, of course, you just use those light neon markers to draw right on that.
Good, Bill.
That'd be interesting. I've spent so much time shooting at banquet halls and things like that, and they tend to use cloth, and that's because it's absorptive, and so you spill things, it doesn't puddle up. That could be a difficulty during your shooting circumstance, because if anything gets knocked over, that's going to be a reflective surface for your overhead camera shot. But also in banquets, they use what are called table clips. They're little three-sided things, so any standard banquet table, they will have tons of tablecloth covers, and they use these little plastic clips to straighten it out, make it a little nicer a surface. So you could do that, but either way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of catering uses some sort of polyester-based tablecloth because it's just easier to clean to get back to your thing. I wouldn't use vinyl because you'll end up with a lot of specular highlights with your lights. You'll be chasing the highlights and the lights across something that's pure vinyl. But a polyester-based cloth probably would be a little bit better. And what I would do is just buy a couple of them. The one thing that we tend to do is buy in bulk on those kinds of things. Like I need this thing. What I'm always afraid of is it'll stop being made available, and suddenly I'll be kind of stuck. So what I'll tend to do is buy 5 or 10 of them, and then I only carry a couple of them with me. But if something gets permanently stained and I can't get it out, and you'd be surprised at what you can get out when you soak it, in some kind of bleach-based system. It's there. I wouldn't use white. White's a lot harder to expose for, so gray or blue tends to be a really good color for that, depending on what you're cooking. Go ahead, Lois.
Well, if you don't know what they are going to be, if you're going to a place where you don't know exactly what you're going to have, believe it or not, sheets work very well because whatever surface they have there, you are covering up. It's thin, so it's not going to be hard to work with, and you can get them in lots of different colors. So sheets are good.
The other thing is to fold them well, and then the other thing I would say, or you can roll them around something so that it'll tend to pick up less hard folds on them. So if you roll them around a dowel or some kind of some round thing that's there with, they tend to. If you carefully do that, you'll end up with a lot less wrinkles. The other thing to do is take a steamer with you. So steamer, what you do is you just take that thing and you hang it somewhere, and then you take the steamer and you steam it, and you'll steam out all the wrinkles. Especially if it's a polyester-based one, it'll happen pretty quickly. Don't iron the polyester ones. That's why you want a steamer. And then you can lay it down. It'll be nice and smooth. Next question.
Peter Moore comes to us, Auckland, New Zealand, for the next question. I'll be playing live at my new local pub on Thursday evening tonight. Any tips for a noob streaming to after hours, or should I just send it to my YouTube AC, and tips for what that live iPhone camera might look like? Happy to not stream and edit later. I'm sorry if I got a little confused in there.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
The two parts that you have to worry about. The first part, of course, the camera, getting it out in the crowd and making sure somebody doesn't knock it over. And second of all, the sound that comes out of the iPhone, because if you've got a very crowded area, you're going to hear more of the people than you do the music. What I do and a lot of other musicians do is they'll take the phone and they'll set it to the right next to the speaker pointing at you. So they'll get as much of the speaker as possible, little of the crowd noise as possible. But you might have a different solution to put up a microphone for that. And in that case, I'm always a fan of trying to get that camera in front of you rather than to the side. So if you have somebody sitting at a table and they have a mic up high, you should be able to do that. But that's what I would do if you don't, is put it as close to the speaker as possible.
And if you're going to play more than a couple minutes, we'd prefer to schedule it if we're going to put it in after hours. And so, occasionally folks come in and play a little something for us. But if you're going to play more than about 5 minutes, we would recommend just YouTubing it, letting people know that you're doing it, and then we can talk about it later. And if you want to do something more organized within after hours, just ping me and we'll find a time. All right, next question.
Peter Moore is right back again for another one. He says, given the Christian holiday Good Friday pretty much shuts down New Zealand and Australia for the day, how does the panel handle this and other religious holidays or days during shoots and so forth?
We always, if it's during something, we ask people if they have any conflicts. I mean, that's the big thing. We just ask if they have a conflict or if there's something that they need to do on their end. That's and for Jewish holidays, we pay attention a lot. We pay a lot of attention to Jewish holidays because B&H gets closed. So all for a week sometimes. So we know all of those holidays pretty well because of that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, would machine translation combined with speech synthesis help build a less North American-centric audience for office hours?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, they really don't have the AI capability of reading various dialogues, talking back and forth. They barely have it good enough to read text from a script. It just doesn't have the nuances and tempo that the real conversation has.
Next question.
Kenneth Jones in Seattle, Washington starts with, talk to me like I'm 5 years old. How do I match the video output of 3 Canon Vixia cameras to some standard? Name the steps, explain the steps, and tell me how to ensure the cameras stay adjusted from session to session.
Get a white card. Set it to where it won't be session to session, but put a white card on the stage that you want to have it there. Fill the frame with each one of these cameras. It has to be under the lighting. You can't do it somewhere else. And fill the frame for each one. Make sure the settings are all the same in the piece there. Point it towards that white card and hit auto white balance. We don't usually use that anymore, auto white balancing, but in the case of the Vixias, you will need to use it. And so you basically want to make sure that your settings are the same, and then point it at a white card that's sitting where you're going to shoot, and then hit auto white balance for each camera. They have to be in exactly the same location, and then you'll get something that is pretty darn close. Bill, real quick.
Everything that Alex said, the white balance symbol that's pretty universal is a couple of little wedges with a dot in the center between them. So if you don't know where their white balance control is, look for that.
Next question.
Kenneth Jones in Seattle, Washington says, the Plug-in Alliance announced a merger of several entities, PA Native Instruments, Isotope, Brainworks. They're all joining forces under the name Soundworks with a huge discount on their offerings until April 26th. What is the future for this enterprise, he wonders?
I'm not familiar with it. So did they merge, or did they just partner, or they're just joining forces under? I guess they're just maybe just selling them. This is a lot of people have done this in the past, where they say for once a year there's a whole bunch of apps that are all going to be available for very low price, and it's been very profitable for them. The hard part is then it becomes, you train your audience to wait, for that, which can be very damaging to your overall yearly budget. Next question.
Roz McNulty in Vancouver, Canada is up next, and Roz says, recommendations for Thunderbolt USB 3 to DisplayPort cables from the new Mac Studio. It is supposed to be better than HDMI.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So OWC, of course, is the one that a lot of us use that will allow that, but also pluggable. It'll be the larger DisplayPort plugs in the pluggable dual HDMI DisplayPort option, but those work really well.
Next question.
Ronnie Hofsey of Tromsø is back with how to color match different cameras for live multicam production. Ursa's is using an internal LUT, but also need to match Sony's, Canon's, and so forth. Should we just load a LUT into the Blackmagic bidirectional microconverter for non-Blackmagic cameras, and how to create a good enough LUT?
Yeah, so that is exactly what you want to do. Is you want to load the. I'm trying to find a chart for you to look at. But anyway, to make a good enough LUT, you need to look at the color corrector inside of Resolve, and you'll find that there are certain charts that it's designed to work with. You put those charts up in front of all the cameras, and then you can take it into Resolve, and essentially you pull that over top of those, and you'll see little X's going into the color, but you have to make sure it's correct. Like I had a Dumont chart that's a 12R. There's no 12R. It needs to be 24R. so, and then what Resolve will do is make the correction so that it matches that to the correct colors that it knows is designed for that chart. So that's the way to do it as good enough. So now the way that I do it is I get one camera exactly the way I want it to look. So I kind of work on the look and feel of it. And because it's not going to necessarily be accurate, it's going to be a little warm, a little bit of cool, whatever it is. But I'm going to make that look exactly the way I want it. And then what I'm going to do is take every camera looking at that same chart over and over and over again, and I corner pin them both over top of each other. I set the top one as difference, and I sit there and color correct until it turns almost black. It won't turn always all the way black. When you do that, that LUT will match that camera straight in. Now I'll also do that again to make sure that it does. But then I do that with each camera. It takes time to do it the way I do it, but they are very close to each other. I would say imperceptibly close to each other. Next question.
John Nichols in Concord, California has our last first hour question. MacBook Air M1 connected to an ATEM Mini. I can watch and or listen to office hours when routed to my Mac speakers. When switching to the HDMI output for sound, YouTube stops functioning. It freezes. And has anybody seen this before? And he notes that he's changed cables before and so forth.
I don't know. The only thing I can think of is that it's considering that not a legal output for DHCP, not DHCP, but HDCP. And so, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Is there any? My question would be if you have any other software involved, like Audio Hijack or anything like that, that's routing your sound and making sure that it's pointing to the HDMI, because Apple's very finicky when it comes to routing audio.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. You've stumped us on that one. We haven't seen that problem before, so we'll keep thinking about that. I'm sure we'll run into it now. Now that you brought it up, we'll run into it again. All right. We are now going to shift to our second hour, and we're going to talk a little bit about photogrammetry with the phones, with mobile. And what's interesting about this is a lot of the early photogrammetry was done on mobile was done on the Android platform. So a lot of the early tools were much more designed for that. Whereas but now we're mostly doing it with iPhones because of the LiDAR that's built in. And first of all, I'm going to explain a little bit about what photogrammetry actually is, and then we'll dive into how we're doing it on the phone. So one of the things you want to look at here is photogrammetry has been actually around for a while, and in some cases we used to call it image modeling. And so essentially what we would do is look at an image, And I probably should pull up an image here. Let me see if I can find one really quickly. But we would look at an image and we would try to figure out where the boxes, where the boxes where we might be able to fit boxes in to those things. And because the reason we use squares and boxes was because we were always trying to, let's see if I can find this here. So we'll just cut to this here real quick, just so I can use this as an example. If I cut, I'm sorry, this is going to be white. So if we look at this photo here, if we look at a series of photos, one of the things that we're looking at here is we would say, oh, we want to put a box here, we want to put a box here. And this is in the 90s. And we would basically, we use this a lot for what we call camera mapping, or back in old ILM days, make sticky. And so you drop a plane out here, you start putting boxes in where these buildings are, and you start to figure out where those things should be, and trying to, basically rough this out. Straight on is actually pretty hard. At an angle, you start to see things fall off, and so let me see if I can find a better one here. I think I was actually looking for a specific image really quickly, and I didn't find it. What you're looking for, this is good. Let's see if I can, sorry for the, here's a good example here. So when you look at something like this, what you're seeing here is you're seeing the vanishing points. See these vanishing points here? And so a lot of times what we would do is drop a cube in to here, like just put a cube in, and we play with it until we play with the focal length, we play with its position so that we get these lines here. So we're looking at trying to, figure this stuff out. And we would do this by hand in the 90s. So we would literally get these boxes in. And once you got one cube in the system that was perfectly matched, so it made sense, you could start building all around it. You could start building things that were, okay, I'm going to put a plane in here, and I know that if I start dropping these boxes in, and they all should start fitting in along these planes. But you had to get this one axis ready, and a picture like this is really good. And it's really illustrative because these kinds of pictures are part of what really gives the system the information it needs to figure out where things are going. And again, the system in the 90s was our eyes. But what we did over time is we basically got, as we moved forward, we were able to start having computer graphics, computer programs. One of the first ones was called Image Modeler. An image modeler would basically say, give me a bunch of photos, and I'm going to look at the photos that are similar to each other. So if I have a bunch of different photos of the same object, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say there's specific points on that photo. And if I can match up 10 or 12 of them, I can figure out what the rest of the model is. So Image Modeler was one of the first ones to do it there. The big change that's been happening, and you can end up taking a lot of photos with this. So when you start getting into photogrammetry, you start, it can start to get pretty complicated as far as what you're putting together. So the main thing here is that you take, occasionally you take hundreds of photos. So here's a little project that I may have shown earlier. Now this was not done with phones necessarily, but it is it gives you a sense of what this looks like here. So let me cut to this. So this is a little bit of anchor watt, and so you can see some edges here, and this is just errata that's out here, but this is all in 3D, including even the ropes. And if we go here, you can see this. So all of this is 3D information. Now this was shot with a Canon Mark II or whatever. Even if we look at this wall, you can see how it just kind of cut and sit in gray because this is a 3D model. And all of the geometry here, all of this stuff here is all photogrammetry that's put together here. I was in Anchor Watt and was taking lots of photos. Here's all the photos. Those are all the pictures I took to actually, and this is using a program called Metashape to put this together. But this is a representation. So you end up taking a lot of these photos, and you can see how they're kind of overlapped with each other. So a lot of them are here. Now you can see the points that are being generated here as we look at these, and here you can see some more. This is just a little, again, little test project that I was doing while I was shooting there, doing something else. This is what I do this is what happens when you give me a free day in Cambodia. I take a bunch of photos. So anyway, but it literally captures all the grooves and everything else that you have there. And so this is, and so you can see this here. Now, there are a couple of things because I've done this for a long time. One of the things I knew is that this is a great place to do photogrammetry because there's lots of details to grab onto. So there's lots of, points of contrast that it can grab onto and figure out where things are. Things that tend to be harder to do photogrammetry with are things like shiny surfaces, clean surfaces, things that don't have any geometry to pull onto. But because this has so much that has been developed over the last 800, 900 years, it's pretty useful. So anyway, and so this is building something that's kind of a larger piece there. So anyway, so this is what photogrammetry can do as you start to put it together. And a lot of it's being used now. And Apple, of course, is creating a lot of tools around object capture. And some of those tools are starting to trickle out. What Apple did was they didn't necessarily build the whole tool for you. What they did is they gave developers the tools that they needed to put it together. And we're starting to see some of that stuff, kind of some of the tools that they've been building come out. I'm going to talk primarily to the Apple ecosystem because it's more developed now, which is funny because, again, Android was first. But now the big thing that's changing with a lot of things is that we have two different kinds of ways of capturing the world. And there's lots of ways, but there's two big ways to do it. One is what we would call structured light, and that's LiDAR. So LiDAR is structured light. It means that I know where a point is in the distance. That is, I know exactly how far away it is. And that means I know its scale. I know where it is. I know how it allows me to track it much more accurately. But the problem is that LiDAR is very expensive to do in a very dense way. If you looked at the stuff I just showed you, we have LiDAR actually of this too, because I had a scanner there. Anyway, so I can't build something that dense easily, with LiDAR because the scanner has to basically it's scanning up and down. And even if it's doing 1 million points on each scan, the problem it has as it does that is that as it gets further away, those points get further apart. And so the thing is that so you end up with kind of a mesh of everything that becomes a wider mesh as you move further away from it. So LiDAR tends to not have the same resolution as photogrammetry. Now, photogrammetry is what we often refer to as unstructured light, which means I have pixels in front of me and I don't know anything about them. I don't know what those pixels mean until we start to relate them to other things. Now, the pictures that I just showed you, those are all created from unstructured light. It just figured out where all the cameras were and based on those vanishing points that we talked about earlier. But there's the new tools coming out on the phone are going to give us a new level of accuracy because we're now able to essentially have we can mix and match those. So the structured light gives us, more controls. Let me pull up the two apps that I use the most in this area. One is called Polycam, and the other one I just started doing is called Reality. And Reality. I just was talking about. I want to say Reality Capture, which is just in beta. So I'm going to show you a little bit about. We'll start with Polycam. Let me see if I turn this, if it'll do it. Yeah. It's not turning on the switcher, so let's just go ahead and so here it is off of my phone. And so if I hit this and I start to move around, you can see this tracking. You see this blue area down here. So if you look at this, you'll see this, it says I don't have this yet. So if I move down a little bit, you'll see it start to fill in. And what it's doing is it's grabbing. Now this is mostly using the LiDAR. Let's turn that off a little bit. And so now I'm moving around, and it's basically showing me what it's grabbed onto, as it goes. And so it's pulling this information in as we go here, and so that's the beginning of that. And what we'll do is we'll hit stop, and here you can see the kind of the rough geometry that it created, and you'll see that and here's all the images it took, right? That green area right here. So this is all the images that I just took of my desk. And what we can say is, okay, I want to process that, and what it's going to do, it's starting to process it. I don't know what it does. It just goes through those to tell you that it's doing something. I guess it's better than a timer, as it kind of works through that image there. And so what it's doing now is it's processing all those photos as well as the LiDAR information. And this is using both of those to some degree. So here's the 3D model of that. So it's not bad. It's a pretty good representation of what you have there. And it will be pretty accurate if you could literally measure it. Now you'll see that it's still a low resolution model. You can kind of see that there. And so it's not, but it did grab onto it. And it was able to kind of get some basic reference. And so, and a lot of the stuff is still early days, with a lot of these pieces here. I think, let me see if I can show you this is one I just shot. This is let's see if I can jump into it here. Again, you let me, see if I can, there we go. Let me cut to this. So this is a bar. So I just, again, this was the illegals that we've done stuff with. They were getting set up here. You can see that if they're moving, it doesn't work as well. But they were getting set up, and this is a bar in Mill Valley, and I just literally just walked around and just essentially painted the area here. So this was just me just grabbing onto it, and you can see that it's actually this is all a 3D model that I grabbed onto. Now, am I going to shoot out of this? Am I going to use this in a project? No, but it's accurate. I can measure like how far things are apart. So if you put me in a little space, I'll just go use Polycam and just wander around and grab the imagery, so that I have, I can now say, like, I can put a camera, in the back here, and you can see that there's like, if I wanted to measure this area, I can go, I want to measure from, let's see here. I want to measure from here to here, and that's 5 feet 4 inches. So by grabbing that data, I just use this as reference, if I want to do it there. So that's, so I grab that all the time in anywhere I'm going to shoot, if it's small enough. Now the limitations of the phone is, and if you have questions about this, go ahead and put them in the individual comment. But the limitations of the phone are that it can only see about 30 feet out, to do that. Now the other tool, so that's Polycam, and it'll capture both spaces as well as objects. And I've been playing with that since it came out, and it's a pretty useful app. The next one that I've been playing with is also what's called Reality Scan. Sorry, not Reality Capture. Reality Capture is the overall app. Now, this is the test flight. It crashes every time, the first time you open it up. Okay. So this one's like next gen, I think, in a lot of ways. So let me show you what this looks like here. So if I hit, now what you're going to see is, now I can do it automatically, or I can just be tapping on it. I like the tap better, because I feel like sometimes I can't get it to take a picture where I want it to take a picture. And so what I'm doing is, and if you pull back, I'll show you, this is where you were with when you took the photos. So you're actually, I'm actually taking these photos, and a lot of times I'm going to take them at, I can move past this and go. And so what I really like about this is that it's giving me a guidance of, where my photos where I've already taken the photos. Now, the reason it can figure that out is because of the LiDAR in the phone. So now you see those boxes, and what those boxes are is they're telling you, I know I have a lot of good data where it's green. I'm not sure. I don't have a lot of confidence in the data that is or yellow or orange, depending on how you're looking at it. And I don't have very much data on the red areas. And so what this does is it starts to give you a guide. And I think it's really fun to play with, because you can see it, it's actually using the AR to help you, figure this out as you go there. So now it says, okay, I've got a bunch of that information here. So it says, I think I have it. It wants to go forward. So we'll go ahead and we'll, now we have this, what you're seeing here is this box, and this box allows me to decide what part of this I want to actually capture. I can bring this down, so I don't capture everything there. I can, pull these, anyway, so that you can kind of adjust these, so that I'm not capturing everything there. So I'm kind of building a bounding box, so to speak. And so now I'll hit apply. And then now it's only paying attention to the area that I gave it here. And so now I can go back to taking pictures if I want to. and it's only measuring that smaller area that's there. And the reason that I'm taking so many photos is it has to triangulate now, number one is there'll be occlusions, and number two is that there's going to be both occlusions as well as I need multiple positions of the same thing for it to figure out where those photos are. It has a really good idea of where those photos are because I actually it has the LiDAR information that's guiding it in position. So that helps a lot. So now we take this and we'll say, okay, I want to inspect it. So here, now this is showing like, and again, this is just a, it's just the areas, this isn't the resolution of the model. Now from here, what I'll do is I'll export this to Sketchfab. I think, there we go. And later, maybe during the show, it'll be done. While we're looking at that, I will. I'm going to jump into Sketchfab. Sketchfab's doing the processing. Both of these are owned by Epic, by the way. And so here you can see other ones that people have done inside of Sketchfab. So you get a lot of information here. Let me take a look at if I can show you mine here. Let's see here. So here's this is something that was on my outside in my living room. My wife loves this little thing here. So anyway, so here, this is a close up, and you can see that there's a lot of 3D information. So it looked like those boxes until it was processed. So it uploads all those images, and then it looks like just those boxes when you send it up. But what it comes back as is this. And this is a, it's a lot of detail, here. So this is not just a spheres. If you look at it here, this is like real geometry that it built and textured from that area. So it is, this is going to be pretty exciting for a lot of us down the road as we start to grab objects if you think about it, for education, for reference, for all kinds of other things. You can just capture this world, and this is 3D geometry. You can export this out. I haven't tried to do this yet, but I could export it out and print it if I wanted to. This would be a heavy model to print, but you could absolutely print a miniature version of this, to make that work. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there to do that. So this is kind of, these are the two apps that I've been playing with the most. The Reality Scan is the most recent one, but this is the what we've been kind of tooling with as far as the phones go. The phones are becoming very popular, very powerful. In both their accuracy as well as their detail. And the reason, again, is because of the mixture of that LiDAR, which solves a bunch of the problems because it knows exactly how far away things are, and the photogrammetry, which is actually taking all of those images and turning it into 3D geometry. So let's go ahead and jump into the first question.
Sure. Our first one comes from Jeff Vreeland of Indianapolis, Indiana, and he says, I've heard about photogrammetry a few times, but can someone level set exactly what photogrammetry is?
And I think I kind of covered that a little bit before that, but that photogrammetry is really turning photos into geometry, and how do we take those photos from different angles? And again, what's most important is to really think about, if I have a square, we'll just say, that I'm trying to capture. What I'm trying to do is take photos, from different angles, but I need them to overlap. So I need this photo over here to get this to here, and this photo over here to get this to here, and this photo over here to get over here, because I need the overlapping points that are in both photos. That's how photogrammetry figures out where all the photos, the focal length, the geometry, and then projects back from those cameras, what that, where all that information is. And so it's very important that they're overlapping. And also it's important that you see vanishing points. So the temptation when you have an object is to take what we call orthographic photos. So you're taking like one here and then one on this side, and you think that's going to work. But if they don't share spaces, and if you can't see vanishing points in those lines, it's very hard to figure out what it's looking at, because it doesn't have any way to cross-reference. The other thing that's important is changing the focal length is very difficult for photogrammetry. So you don't want to change focal length ever. In fact, A lot of the other thing that you get into when you start to do this, and again, we're doing this with phones, but if you're doing it with anything else, is even changing focus is something we try to avoid. So a lot of times it's better to gain up a little bit and have a little bit more grain and then close the aperture down. Now, the cool thing with the phones is the apps are doing a lot of that for you. So when you're doing it, you don't have to deal with the apps are taking over. And because the iPhone has a very known lens, they're picking the lens that they want to use. The advantage that you have there is that it's doing a lot of the things that catch us when we're doing physical cameras. This is exciting when we're talking about, the 12 megapixel camera on the phone. If the rumors of a 48 megapixel camera comes out, actually happens, and if it's truly 48 pixels, that gets 48 megapixels. It gets really exciting because resolution, the more resolution you have in your camera, the more details you can get out of the photogrammetry, assuming that information is accurate. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, and he says, can you do VR 180 or VR 360 using photogrammetry for the texture mapping?
You can. You can definitely do 180 and 360s. Well, there's a couple different things there. One is you can do objects and do photogrammetry and then put them into a 180 or 360 scene, texture mapped and everything else, and then render that all back out again. So that's one possibility. To actually capture them from 180 or 360, we do have tools that do it. I don't find it to be as accurate because you have lens distortion from these wide angle lenses. You have less detail because you're capturing so much information in one capture over that resolution. So I might have 4,000 by 6,000 on a spherical, but I'm not getting as much data as I would if I was just taking the photos. So that's the kind of the challenge that you get into there. Next question. Can't hear
President
you.
Bellingham. Whoop, you can't hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's weird. I didn't hit anything. Vincent Alvarez of Bellingham says, I just purchased 50 NFC, so near-field communication stickers to use with my iPhone. Never used this ability before. Any creative or productive ideas on what to program? And that's interesting. Does that relate to photogrammetry, Alex? Or
I don't know. I'm actually not familiar with NFC stickers. These
they're
are
the little price things on objects that have that little code inside, and so it carries information, but I don't know if it helps a camera determine depth. It's usually just like a business card kind of thing you can program into an NFC sticker and put the sticker on an object, and that will tell people who it belongs to.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that might have been a first hour question that found its way into the second one, because I don't know.
That's sweeping retail, but I don't think my guess, being hardly conversant, is just that probably doesn't have much or have anything to do with photogrammetry.
Yep. Next question.
Okay, that one's done reading. And then Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. What holder works best as a multi-camera rig?
I haven't used multi-camera for this type of thing. One of the things that I do think is important is for people to think about how to do photogrammetry or in photogrammetry or in stereo or in a lot of other things. What we really want is someone to come up with a system that will take the photos from multiple cameras at one time. And I haven't seen that process work yet where we're integrating it. What a lot of us want is someone to build a rig that we can put 2, 3, 4 cameras into, and then be able to have something that there's two things. If we're wanting to capture objects quickly and accurately, one of the things that'd be really useful for us is to have it be something that is multiple cameras that are taking those photos. And a lot of times you want to think about it. You would think that at first when you do a Lazy Susan, you'd think you'd want cameras all over. And if you can do it all in one fire, then that would make sense. But otherwise, you want the lighting to be the same. So what you want to think about here is cameras like this, and having like four, literally 4 phones if you had it here, and then a Lazy Susan that's motorized. And in a perfect world, to do this really quickly, you'd have your object here, and basically all of them fire at the same time, and then it turns, and then they all fire, and then it turns, and then they all fire, because then you're getting the same lighting, going through it, because they're all coming from the same angle, roughly. So the thing is, because when you turn it around, unless you get perfect lighting, you'll be a little different from different angles. So anyway, a lot of us try to do it, have done this with cameras before, but not usually. In the past, we've basically been controlling those cameras from, we've been controlling these cameras from a controller that basically goes into a Canon camera that just captures it. And the phone's what we want to use, but we haven't seen an app that allows us to fire all of these at the same time, so that we can build a small array of iPhones to take pictures of objects. So that's something that's still missing. The big advantage of the iPhone is that depth map. The depth map isn't super accurate, but what it does do is it lets us cut the object from the background, because it definitely knows that, these things that I just shot are definitely in the background, and this is definitely in the foreground. So that's a really interesting puzzle. So to make that work, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I was gonna refer to our question earlier about the GoPro Bones being able to use that, but you just said, or our 360 camera for that matter, but you just said the depth is the important thing there. So you just couldn't build a rig without having it. Well, it would have to be iPhones at best, right?
Yeah, right now I would say iPhones are the best. I mean, the best are something that is a high resolution image camera that will get great stuff that you throw into. People have been using that. That's what the Smithsonian uses. In fact, if you want to see a lot of photogrammetry in use, if you go to the Smithsonian, just search Smithsonian 3D, and you'll see them. They capture hundreds of objects, and because it's a national treasure, all those objects are up there on the web, so you can just download them for free and use them in educational or other things like that. And so those are that's a great place to see photogrammetry in action. And now the phones are becoming more and more powerful, and I really think that this is really important, somewhat for just having fun with it, but education. This is just a massive opportunity. You can go out and grab anything out there, turn it into a 3D model, and a lot of us are hope against hope, that we're going to see USDZ supported in more apps. Right now, I've already taken stuff where I take photogrammetry, I can import it into Motion as a USDZ file and then animate it around. And so you could consider doing something like that as well. Next question.
Next one comes from John M. Gerard in Berkeley, California. Hat is the actual name in the iOS App Store, he says, for the thing you were mentioning. I tried to search for Reality Scan and couldn't find it.
Yeah, Hat. I'm not familiar with Hat, but Reality Scan is on beta. So you have to, if you do a search for Reality Scan beta or something like that, you'll see it. That's a preview. I don't know when it's going to be released as a product yet. It's not available at the moment. So it was only the first 10,000 people that signed up for it. So that's kind of not many people have seen it, which is why I wanted to show it on the show. But I'm looking for Photogram. I was looking for this hat. I didn't find it. Anyway, so or maybe that was just a mistype. Anyway, the Reality Scan is coming. Polyscan is right now, so that you can use that one at the moment. And the Reality Scan, I think, they filled up their first 10,000 people that wanted to use it. But I think it's a pretty slick app that is pretty useful for stuff. I think it's going to be something we use a lot of. Next question.
Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, possibly Colorado, says, is there a way to use a LUT for snow in reality capture? I'm recreating avalanche accidents.
A LUT for snow. I'm assuming for the color of the snow. I think that you would need to color correct the texture maps afterwards for the snow. So you take the photos there, and then you would, all the photos, you can build a 3D model. And then when you export that 3D model, there's going to be a texture map attached to it. Like if you export an OBJ, for instance, there'll be a texture map attached to it. I think you'll have to color correct those whites to get the snow the way you want it. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, in fiddling around with snow things, so I had a couple of jobs I had to do snow. Particle generators out of Motion was the process I took. So creating those with some depth information to that and then bringing it overlaid on top of a scene seemed to work better for me, but I don't know how to integrate that into actual photogrammetry.
Yeah, because you wouldn't. So you take you might take the photogrammetry and put it into motion, and then you could add snow in front of it in 3D. But the photogrammetry would be a USDZ model inside of motion to animate it around. Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany is up next. He says, is a motorized slider a useful tool to making capture easier?
It can be. I find that the going straight across is not really what we want to do. We want to go, get different angles. A lot of us have found that lazy Susans are, better. I'm sorry for all the Susans out there listening. It's the technical term for it. I don't know how to, the turntable. I said it. We call it lazy Susans.
It's not a slam.
Sorry about that. We'll have to find a better name for that. We're trying to find better names for everything nowadays. So a motorized turntable would be another way for us to, basically a lot of us are kind of playing with this. And I'm playing with some hardware that we're hopefully going to use to capture this in the near future. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So Pivo makes a turntable style, and they just introduced at CES one that actually tilts up and down a little bit, which I think will be perfect for this. And I think they've dealt with photogrammetry in the past, along with making GIFs and still photos and things like that. So that would probably be one to take a look at for moving the camera around.
Yeah, and I think that what's missing right now is an application that will talk to the turntable and then talk to the cameras and then get them all working together. And I think that that's something we haven't seen anybody do yet. I think that there is a future somewhere that does that, because it just seems like it the next, for a lot of us, it seems like the next thing, is that someone's going to figure out that we should get this all tied together. I get really excited about things like sculpture. There is a, if you think about African art, which I've seen a lot of that are these sculptures, theoretically you could have people able to, because the other piece of this is that you can take your objects, a 3D object, and just throw it down on a table in front of you. And I don't really have a lot of open space here, so I can't show it to you here, but then you can look at it. In fact, well, let's try this. Hold on. Let me see if I can make this work. And this will be a short session if people don't ask more questions, and that's fine. I've got a busy day. I'm not going to complain to all of you. If let's go back to this here. So this is this object that I was showing you earlier. And what I can do, there's one little bug here with Reality Scan, is that, so I'm going to hit this button here, and what it's going to do is it's going to say it's loading, and I'll move around a little bit. It's loading the 3D model. And it's going to come in typically really big. This is where this. So now you can see that it's tracked it. It's tracking the space there. It's figuring out what it wants to do with that. Oh, and then I just tap to place the model. And again, I usually find that it comes in pretty big, but we'll see. Much bigger than it was in the real world. It's thinking. Yeah, I don't know. Of course, this worked perfectly before, but now it doesn't, or it's really big. So anyway, but the it was just so big that it's way up in my. Let me make it smaller here. There we go. Let me shrink this down just a little bit more. So it's about the right size. So it was just so big that it was, so scale is a problem in this beta right now. But now I'm just moving my phone around, and I can go, oh, I want to look at this close, and I want to look at this over here. So the big thing is that you want to show someone something, assuming that the scale works, which it doesn't work here. Polycam, it works correctly, and here it's popping in at the wrong scale. But you could send somebody something if you built something, or you're thinking about something, or you want to show them something. Assuming that scale works, you can really look at it. And this just looks like it's sitting on my desk. And it's tracking into it. And so and again, when you think about education, being able to just take a photo of something, you don't know how to model it. This took me 10 minutes to take pictures of, maybe 5 minutes to take pictures of. That would take weeks to model, to model this much detail into something. And so you can imagine sending that kind of information, and now it's available, or it's about to become available on our phone, being able to send that information to a client, to a friend, to your, partner, whatever. You can send it to them, and they can say, oh yeah, that would look great here. And you're seeing more of this right now in like Amazon. I was looking for something under my TV, and saw one that you can just literally take the phone and just place it underneath it so I can see what it looked like at scale. So there's a lot of this kind of thing that's happening. And again, one of the reasons we want to talk about it today is that it is super important to stay up on the trends, and this is going to be a big trend. Like photogrammetry is going to be a big trend, and so it's important for us to spend an hour, even on things that people may not be as interested in or know much about, but it's something that we want to kind of keep paying attention to in that process. Let's go to the next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles is up next. He says, would it be practical to use photogrammetry for a walkthrough or site survey and send it out with the production book so that all the departments in a live show can get an advanced look for camera placement, cable runs, and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what I will say is what we use LiDAR for that. So I will say that that's a lot faster if you're talking about an entire space. So a lot of spaces that I work in, the first thing we do is we bring a LiDAR camera in and we just scan the whole space, just scan it. And the reason is that now I have really accurate data, and it's much faster than trying to capturing a whole space with a phone is difficult. And so that's, to anything more detailed than the bar I just showed. So we tend to use a LiDAR something like a Faro 350 or even a BLK 360. We'll use one of those to grab that data quickly, so that we have the data. It's really valuable for live shows to have that data because you can figure out the camera placement. You know exactly where it is. You can figure out sets. You can figure out signage. You can figure out all of those things with that process. And I think we'll be eventually able to do it all with our phone. But I think that some of the areas of that are still challenging because of the limitations of the LiDAR, which only go about 30 feet out from the phone. So that's the big challenge there. But I think that it's definitely viable, as we move forward. Next question.
Tommy Chance in St. Paul, Minnesota says, have you used marker dots when scanning? I found them necessary for handheld scanners.
We used to use marker dots all the time when we were doing photogrammetry, but we don't need it anymore unless you're doing something really shiny. And then you might need something on it for it to grab onto, because it's grabbing onto details like little corners of things it can identify. But so if it's shiny something, you might have to do something there. But on a general purpose, we find that the photogrammetry from the phone, even and regular cameras, just do it on their own. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What specs are important for a photogrammetry capture device? Camera resolution, LiDAR resolution? Do later version phones improve the LiDAR capture? And are there metrics to compare one LiDAR device to another?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of metrics. So for camera resolution makes a big difference. Quality of the pixels make a difference as well, though. So if it just if it's just making up a bunch of pixels, it's actually going to be worse. So it really needs to be optical resolution is what you're actually looking for. LiDAR resolution, I don't know exactly what the LiDAR resolution is for the phone, but it is not very high. A lot compared to other LiDAR that we use. And so when I think the LiDAR sensor has not changed in the camera. I mean, from 12 and 13, I think both of them have LiDAR that is, I think the LiDAR sensor is the same. So I don't think that has changed. And then the metrics for a LiDAR device is usually range, accuracy, obviously for the LiDAR device. And then how many points does it pick up per second? So some of the new Leica ones will pick up 2 million points a second. And then we have slower ones that do other things that are only 60,000 points a second. And that makes a difference when it has to do a lot of points all the way around. And so you get a lot more density when it's grabbing a lot per scan. Next question.
David Anderson in Seattle asks, can you get measurements of the object in the 3D image?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, the answer is yes. And I'm starting to see several of the trades now use these tools for estimation. So painting contractors, flooring contractors, et cetera, are using the tools right now.
Yeah. And again, in near field, when you're talking about just a room, the ability to just grab some information and then know everything about it. And again, as I showed with the bar or a little earlier, you can absolutely get a measurement of what you're looking at there and know exactly. And we've measured against it just to make sure, and it's very accurate. As accurate as a tape measure. So it's pretty accurate. Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul's back with, what is a less expensive way to get started? I'm still trying to justify the buy once when chasing a moving target with technology.
For this, to get started with the phones, it's really an iPhone 12 or 13 are the two that have the LiDAR built into them. I don't think the 11 had it in it, but the 12 and 13s have them. And those are the best startup devices to do it. Once you start getting into real LiDAR, look for a used BLK. It might be $5,000 or $10,000, something in that range. but there's not. And then there, of course, there is the I can't think. I never keep the name. There's the real estate scanner that I can't think of at the moment. A Matterport. So Matterport is another one that we used to own a Matterport, and we would use it. The geometry isn't very good, but it's a great way to just walk through a venue and grab a bunch of data that people can walk around virtually later. Next question.
Ronnie Hossie in Tromsø, Norway says, is Reality Scan more for smaller objects and other tools for big scans, or could Reality Scan work for all types of scans?
I've only had it for a couple of days, and I've only used it on a couple objects. So I'm saying objects, but I bet you it will grab onto a whole scene, and we'll test that some more. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, what app or apps and tools or tool would you suggest for those new to photogrammetry?
I think the Polycam is probably the best one that's publicly available right now. So I would get onto that one. That's probably the best one to do it. It's like after the first 14 days, it's like $8 a month. So it's not dirt cheap. But I would give it a whirl. It's pretty cool. Next question.
Patrick Spillane in Haddonfield, New Jersey says, after the photogrammetry process is complete, can you crop the picture to select a subset of the image?
Yeah, you can always cut pieces out of it when it's done. You can set or you can either reprocess it from the raw data and just make that bounding box smaller, or you can go in and actually clip the geometry. So both of those will work as you go through it there. Next question.
Looks like Leslie Cernick, who says, if you use a LiDAR camera for capture that isn't your phone, what software can you use to create the 3D models that are not an app?
So there's yeah, well, they're all applications, but the one that I'm most familiar with that I've been using for years has been Metashape. I have to change the name because it used to be something else. so it used to be a different name. So Metashape is now it's if you have any Russian filters, it is a Russian company that does that. But they have been around for a long time, and they have a lot of really high-end tools, and a lot of us got used to using them. Reality Capture is the company that makes Reality Scan. That's the new app that only 10,000 people have. That's the other pretty popular one to make that happen. And so those are the two big ones in the world that I work in. Those are the two it's one or the other that most people actually use. And you can just dump photos into them and make that. The Cambodian project that I showed earlier, that's all of this, all that is all done in Metashape. And so that's just dumping photos, raw photos, no GPS, no LiDAR, just into it, and it just figures it out over hours. You let it run overnight, and you come back and it's there. Next question.
Jack Ruppel is back from Breckenridge, and it's about the earlier question. He said the earlier question on NFC tags was referring to location anchors in ARKit 5, he suspects.
I will admit I don't know anything about those, and so I will have to do some research on those. I'll think about that. It's a good idea. Next question. Josh
Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Smarter Everyday YouTube channel highlighted the use of photogrammetry for making extremely accurate measurements of the JWST telescope. What other photogrammetry usages benefit from this level of precision measurement?
So in construction, people are like, and I'm this is kind of a little prep, but we're going to try to bring in a friend of mine that does a lot of really, really high precision LiDAR work. In construction, they might scan something to build something into an area where it has to be perfectly accurate. Like, we're going to build a piece of metal in a shop, and it has to match the 3D model that's there. An example is, I think that one of the projects that they worked on was in Cal Berkeley has a stadium, and they needed to put arches. This is for retro for earthquakes, retrofitting it, and they had to put these metal pieces in the arches. But the arches have been there for a long time, and they're all a little different. There's nothing that's the same about all of them. So they literally scanned all those arches, and then they built the things custom to each arch, and then just slid them in to make that work. And so, especially when you start to think about scanning objects and then using those to build like 3D printing. So one of the things that I do, like when I've built stands for my ATEMs, I have a 3D model of the ATEM, my little Extreme, or the other ones, and I literally take that scan. Or not the scan, but the 3D model that I have that's accurate, and I model to it. So I bring it into Cinema 4D and I build the model around it, and I turn that off and export it and print it. So then I know that way I'm not sitting there trying to print a 1,000 things and trying to make it work, all the little subtleties. I might have to print it a couple times to get just the right fit and finish to it, but I have an accurate model. So that's getting down to millimeters of a millimeter off, it stops working. And so, so getting those down to very high precision areas. Other things that they do with LiDAR in construction is they'll scan amount of dirt. Like you can do this. This is more with LiDAR than photogrammetry, but they'll scan amount of dirt, and then someone will take a bunch of dirt out. They'll calculate how much volume of dirt they took, based on the photogrammetry. Like, this is what it was before. This is what it was. I mean, the LiDAR, this is what it was before. This is what it was later. And then from the photogrammetry, as far as getting really, really accurate, fine details, is that when you really spend the time, like I could use that little scan that I showed earlier as a visual effect shot. If I wanted, like, for instance, if I wanted water to roll over something, if I match that, I get my camera in there and then I match that becomes a collision object. So I can pour water onto it and it'll look like things are rolling over it. And it's all going into all those crevices, and it would all work because I have the photogrammetry. I have all that data for the objects to collide with. And that's why I took it up that one, is because I'm planning to do that as a test where I get it all worked out. And then I can pour literally water or little balls or anything else over top of it, and it'll just bounce around as if it was there, and look theoretically completely accurate. So those are the kind of things that you can do, with that. And again, I think that it gets exciting when you start being able to hand it off as an object that kids can play with, for education. So I think that those things, maybe, do you need that accuracy? I don't know, but is it beneficial? It does get you something. I think it inspires people when they get more accuracy, and it doesn't look like it's just a clunky object. So I think those are some of the things to consider inside of that process. I think we have one more question.
Yeah, it looks like it just popped up. Chris Widener in Lafayette says, can you merge multiple objects once you scan them?
You can. I mean, what you do is you take that into a 3D modeling tool, and then you'd figure out how you're you can either group them together, you can boolean them. It can get very long to boolean them because of the amount of geometry, but you can also bring them into things like ZBrush, which is also owned by Maxon. And that's going to be, you can just take those two volumes and get them in there. And once you get them in there, you can start painting the transition from one to the other inside of ZBrush. And so that can be a really interesting way to kind of very organically pull two things together if you needed to. All right, there we have it. Well, hopefully people enjoyed that little line of questions. It's one of those little previews that we want to have people think about, because I think a lot more of us will do it. And we're probably going to put out some challenges and get a bunch of us actually shooting stuff and comparing and contrasting over the next couple months. And so anyway, it's important to think about, because I think it's going to go from something that is esoteric. It was very esoteric when I started 35 years ago or 30 years ago. Now it's getting to a point where I think everyone's going to do it as just another example. I had a friend with a pipe that needed to be fixed. They needed a piece that would go onto the pipe. I didn't know what that piece was. I didn't know how to describe it. I could try to take a picture. I literally took Polycam and moved it around it slowly. I took that picture. I took the 3D model that was at scale to the hardware store, and I put it on the counter for him, like saying, I need this piece for this piece of hardware. And after the 10 minutes that it took for me to explain to him what I had just done, because he thought it was the coolest thing he had ever seen, he's like, you mean you just took pictures? You did that with your phone? How does that work? And he made me do an example, and he made me do another part here. They were just like, the hardware store person's mind just blew wide open, and they were thinking about all the things, and so then he goes, and then at the end of that, it took him 1 minute to figure out what I needed. He's like, oh, you need this bolt. And he just went out and got it and brought it back, because he knew he could see it literally through my phone. He could see the thing that I was trying to do, and it was at scale, like he said, and he could literally take the bolt and set it next to it, and you could see that it would fit. Other than just screwing it on, you could absolutely see that bolt was going to fit, and then it worked, and so that's the kind of thing. We're going to get to a point where we use it every day. This is not going to be something that this is right now, it's still a little special effects esoteric, but this is going to be something that people just use all the time for those little things. I just need this thing to be workable. Go ahead, John.
When we brought the rocket to the wrapping guy, the car wrapping guy,
yeah,
Chris Fitchie did the 3D model, and it was all in the flag motif. And I did a USDZ and then popped it in the guy's warehouse. He couldn't believe it. And what's really funny is they take the phone and they look on the other side of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and he knew exactly how to do the wrap after he could see it in his warehouse all done up. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're going to start using it more and more. We're going to see people using more and more of this for planning. I've been using it for years as a planning method, but I think that we're going to see more and more people doing this kind of work for planning. All right. Great set of questions from the producers, and great questions and answers from the panel. Can't do it without you. Thanks so much. And great work by our production crew in the back end, who's trying to do the best they can to follow along as we just kind of just trunch through the show. Really, really well done. There's just a huge group of people that are back there that you'll see in the credits here in a second that do just a lot of great work and figure this all out together. All right. Thanks so much. And we will now jump into After Hours. Well, we're going to wait here for a second. It takes a long time for the title to come up. It's a little bit of anticipation there. Look at all these people all working on this project.
I know these people.
Yes.
I've met them before.
I know them too. Look at that. It's very complex.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody. Now we're going to jump.